Christians. If he had continued that life, and if there was a Bible, a similar book like the Bible for those who persecute Christians, I'm sure Saul would have had a good portion of books in that other book of persecution. He was good at what he was doing on both sides. Before he turned his life to Christ, he was the best. He did it extremely well. It also meant that when he turned, when he saw the light, he did the same thing with zeal. Alifanya ile kazi alikuwa anafanya, lakini the opposite. Before that, yeye alikuwa ni mtu ambaye alikuwa ana persecute Christians. But when Saul turned his life to Christ, when Christ appeared to him and asked him why he was persecuting him, and he turned a leaf and changed his life, he did the exact opposite. So well, to the point that he is the person who wrote the the highest number of books, the most books in the New Testament. And Ethan, we had said that we are going to ask, how many books did Saul write? Because that's how we understand about growth. From someone who was persecuting Christians to someone we refer to a lot in the New Testament. How many books? Anyone knows? 13. That is growth. And as Ethan has told us, we can grow in the same way. The way Ethan has also told us about Gideon. Gideon, we are told in the book of Judges, the way he had described himself is the same way some of us describe ourselves. We are the least in our family, and that is not enough. Beyond being the least in our family is also maybe our clan, maybe our community, maybe our country. We could be at a point when everything doesn't look right, doesn't look bright for us. But that is where becomes an opportunity. Hapo ndio sisi tunaweza kuwa. From the point when we do not seem to have a future, we do not seem to have a hope, that is how God comes in to help us grow. Thanks a lot, Ethan. And mine is just to finalize on growth with reference to the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 40. This is one of the memory verses that I've had since I was in Sunday school. We recently came from the season of Christmas when we celebrated the birth of Jesus Christ. The book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 40 says, "And the child grew and became strong in spirit. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him." The message that the three of us will be bringing to you this Sunday, the first Sunday of 2024, is, are you growing? The question that we should be asking ourselves is, are we growing? And as Ethan has told us, growth is not just about relationship with God, that is important, but are you also growing physically? Are you growing mentally? And how can you measure? There are many ways of measuring that growth. Before we get to Luke 2:40, let's get to understand what was happening that made Jesus Christ to grow the way he's being described in Luke chapter 2, verse 40. Let's go to Luke chapter 2, verse 39. This the verse just before 40. And that is also a message for us, especially as parents. What is our role? Tunafanya nini ili kusaidia watoto wetu waweze kujua na kukua katika kila namna ya maisha? Jesus did not just grow. He did not just become strong. It didn't just happen that he was filled with wisdom. His parents had something to do with it. Verse 39 says, "When Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth." 40 now is when he talks about, and the child grew. So the reason Christ grew is because the parents, Joseph and Mary, had done everything required by the law of the Lord. And as a result, Jesus grew, not just physically, he grew mentally, he also grew spiritually. Then the question for us, especially as parents, is what are we doing? Because growth is not something that happens by chance. It is not automatic. You don't just and say that your role as a parent is to make your womb available if you are deliver, and the father be available and be there. It's not just that. Mary and Joseph, we are told, they did everything that was required by the law. As a parent, you're doing everything that is required. It may be as per the law of God. It also could be the way you are building your own tradition and culture as a family. How are you growing your family? Because it does not happen automatically. Another reference is in the book of 1 Samuel 2:26. Let's also look at how Samuel grew. 1 Samuel 2:26. And the child Samuel grew in stature and in favor both with the Lord and with men. That was the child Samuel. It's almost similar to the reference that we've been given for the way Jesus grew. He grew in stature. What is stature? It could be physically. He grew in the way he was expected to grow, but he did not just grow within himself. He grew also and got favor from the Lord and with men. That should be our aspiration in 2024. Wakati sisi tunapokuwa, tusikue tu katika kimwili, tusikue tu katika upendo wetu ambao tuko nao na Mwenyezi Mungu. Pia tuweze kukua katika ambapo tunaishi na watu katika familia zetu, either our nuclear family, extended family, the community within where we live. Are we growing even in terms of favor with the people with whom we live with? A reference to another version of growth is the same 1 Samuel chapter 2, but then the verses just before that, when we also have reference to the sons of Eli. The growth of Samuel can also be referenced to the growth that was happening to the sons of Eli. 1 Samuel 2:12. These are Eli's sons. It says, Eli's sons were wicked men. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of prophets and the people that whenever anyone offered a sacrifice and while the meat was being boiled, the servant of the priest would come with a three-pronged fork in his hand. He would plunge it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, and the priest would take for himself whatever was brought up. But even before the fat was burned, the servant of the priest would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." We are not told how Eli brought up his sons, but we are told about the way they conducted themselves. And these were servants. These were the people who were expected to stand in when people gave sacrifices. But they did wicked things in the sight of the Lord. This is what Eli said to them when he got to know that this is what their sons were doing. This sin, that's verse 17, this sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each year his mother made him a linen robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying, "May the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one prayed for and gave to the Lord. Then they would go home, and the Lord was gracious to Anna. She conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. When you look at Elkanah and Anna's family, you see the way they were focused katika kulea mtoto Samueli, ambapo kila wakati ambapo walienda hekaluni walikuwa wanamchukua, wanamweka hapo, anaangalia, and he was able to grow and understand how to deal with matters God. But on the other side, we have Eli's sons. Verse 22 says, now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of the meeting. So he said to them, why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. Now, know, my sons, it is not a good report that I hear spreading among the Lord's people. If a man sins against another man, God may mediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him? His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. We are not given a reference to vile wana wa Eli walipokuwa wanafunzwa kule nyumbani. But maybe, especially when you note that even when Eli told them to stop doing what they were doing, they did not stop. It may refer us to how they were brought up, where they had no regard for their father, they had no respect for the Lord. So therefore, as teenagers, you see what happens. The boy Samuel grew in stature, and he received favor from God and men. That is how we receive favor. When you go to school, that's how God gives you favor. Even when things are difficult, that is how God's favor will be upon you. Not just the favor that comes from God, but also the favor that comes from men. And that is because Samuel brought himself, he conducted himself in the manner that was required. And favor comes in many ways. Many years ago, not many, it's about 20 years ago, I was in high school. And we had very, I think my family, we had very many challenges, especially when it comes to school fees. And every other term, you wouldn't expect that you would be sent home. As soon as you get to school, the first week, you know you're among the first. Because one, you have not cleared fees for first term. Forget about fees for first term. Kuna arrears ya hiyo mwaka ingine. Almost arrears ya the whole year. Because you've been dodging, explaining that the money will come, it never comes. But one of the things that I got was, even when everyone was being sent home for fees, especially when I was in Form 3, Form 4, I worked very hard. Ile wakati ambapo sijafukuzwa school fees, I made sure that I spent time reading. I remember there were days we would wake up, from Form 3 we would wake up at 4 every morning till we cleared school. And because of that, I was able to be either number 1, number 2, number 3, thereabouts. Because the school did not want me to lose time when I went back home. Because I always told them, ukinituma nyumbani, ndaenda kukaa. And I'll come back, and I may not even have fare ya kurudi. So all time may get done without me coming. And because they saw my hard work, I remember there was a day I had a balance of 26,000. But mtu wa 2,000 alifukuzwa. Mtu mwenye alikuwa na balance ya 2,000 alifukuzwa, akaenda nyumbani. Lakini mimi wa 26,000, that's a fees for the whole year, the previous year. Achana na hiyo mwaka nilikuwa nayo. Basi kufukuzwa because reading from the book of Samuel, I think I had favor from the Lord and I had favor from men. One is, the school alisema huyu tukimtuma nyumbani, marks yake itaenda chini, na maybe in mean score ya shule itapunguka. And indeed, because of my hard work, I passed, and passed very well in my KCPE. That was 20 years ago. And therefore, as Ethan was telling us, when you go to school, let's focus. Let's remain hopeful, even when things are difficult. Maybe right now, you don't have the things that other kids have. Hauna simu, And I'm happy. If you don't have a phone, I'm very happy for you. You don't have, unajua kuna watu wakifungua ile box, unajua kama mnatumianga sanduku siku hizi ama ni suitcase. Unajua vitu zimebadilika. Ni box ama suitcase? Idhan, mnatumia box ama suitcase? Box. Mtu akifungua box, akona juice, kuna box ya biscuit, kuna vitu tamu tamu. Lakini wewe ukifungua, labda uko na kale kiwi kadogo, tissue labda iko kidogo, Colgate ile ndogo, small things. That should not be your focus, as Ethan was telling us. Your focus should be the books that took you there. You're not in that school for long. In no time, you'll come back here to this church to tell us about your stories and make sure they are good stories because of the hard work that you put in. As we wind up, how should we grow as Christians? When we were thinking about this with the team, we say that, as Ethan has said, we grow physically, mentally, and spiritually. But then the other bit is growing in our connections. Watu wanasemanga, I think the way we use connections, Pastor Squeezy, mimi niko connected. Kama ni mambo ya tenda, niko na connection. Kama ni kazi, niko na connection, najua so and so. Kama ni shule, form 1 sahi. Especially if you don't get your best school, it's connection that comes in, which is not a bad thing. Is it a bad thing for me to know the principle of alliance? And pastor akikuja aseme niko na mtoto anataka kwenda alliance, ambia najua headmaster wa alliance. He can talk. Ndiye ile ya kuongea Kikenya, I can help them to get space there. So as Christians, we need to grow in our connections. One is, the most important connection is our connection to God. How connected are we to God? Are we like that tree that is planted by the waters, whose roots go deep, that even in times of drought, in times of great heat, the way jua ya kitengele inaweza tuchoma, it does not die, or it does not wither? Are we connected in that manner? The other way of connecting is to yourself. How do you know yourself? Especially for our teenagers. Are you connected to yourself? Do you know who you are? Kienda shule, don't be tossed from one side to another because you see someone else, labda the way they've done their hair, you want to do it like that. The way they've dressed, you want to do like that. The way they talk. So are you connected to yourself? Do you know who God has made you to be? How connected are you to your family? Because family, eventually, when everything else is said and done, is your cornerstone. How connected are you to your family? How connected are you to your church? And how connected are you to the community? The second level of connection is, of growth, is conversations. Ndio kuna watu wenye wanaweza ongea hii tu hivi tunajua huyo ni so and so anaongea. Let's go to the book of Colossians chapter 4 verse 6. In 2024, let our conversations be described in the way God has described the way they should be in the book of Colossians chapter 2 verse 6. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer everyone. Is that how someone can describe the way you talk? The way you talk to your spouse, the way you talk to your children, are they filled with grace? Is it a conversation that someone would say, indeed, that is a Christian talking? Or is it a conversation that you would not even want to be said to have said that? We've seen many instances when mtu anasema kitu, especially in the media. What happens when it goes viral? Yeah, it wasn't me, or it was misinterpreted, or I didn't mean that. It's because probably you said something, what some people would call a slip of the tongue. But let our conversations, especially in 2024, be full of grace. And grace would mean, doesn't always mean that ukisikia mtu mwingine aliongea vibaya juu yako, unaongea vibaya juu yake. That's what grace is. It's that level of confidence that even though everyone is saying something about me, I need not say anything bad about them. must be seasoned with salt, that you may know how to answer everyone. When we do that, we will receive what Proverbs 15 verse 1 and 2 says. Proverbs 15 verse 1 and 2, it says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. There's another verse here. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Verse 2, it says, when wise people speak, they make knowledge attractive, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly. You can decide which side you want to be. Do you want to be on the side of wise people? When they speak, they make knowledge attractive. I mean, when you speak, someone says, how did you know that? Pastor, is that Alan, no? Lam, yes. When Pastor Lam speaks, someone will say, where did you read that? Ulisoma wapi hiyo? Where did you listen to that? When you speak, someone else would want to say, I heard Lam say this. You can be quoted somewhere. That's what the Bible says. That's how you make knowledge attractive. Because you're speaking with wisdom. So that at the end of this ongea na mtu hii service aseme in the course of the week, unajua Sarah aliniambia kitu hii Sunday yenye bado nafikiria. So and so told me. Don't let it not be that everything you say ni kitu ya kugwaruza tu watu waseme ulisikia. You know, if it ya ulisikia, I've never had it. It's so often that people talk about ulisikia kitu mzuri. Ulisikia Esther. Ulisikia Pastor Esther. Alisema kitu mzuri. Ukisikia tu ulisikia, most likely kuna kitu itakudunga mahali. But can it be that in 2024 one says ulisikia Brian, ulisikia Jennifer? Mtu anafikiria anasema that must be something good that came out of that mouth. But it doesn't mean that umesikia, it means haya. Hata unaanza kutafuta ingine ya umesikia. So let's speak like wise people, whom when they speak, they make knowledge attractive. But also, on the other side, you can speak like stupid people. They say whatever comes out of their mouth is nonsense. It's another version of the Bible says, whatever they speak is nonsense. When we do all these things, when you go to the book of Psalms 92, verse 12, as we wind up, when we are connected, when we grow, there is a way in which God has likened that growth to two trees, a palm tree and a cedar tree. The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar of Lebanon. Planted by the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in their old age. They will stay fresh and green. So in 2024, when we are like that tree that is planted by the waters, old age will not mean much to you. The Bible has said, when we grow like the cedar of Lebanon, and I will ask you to go and research about the palm tree. So the reason we are told about the palm tree, it may take forever for it to grow, but even in the midst of the strongest winds of a tsunami, it will bend sideways, but it never gets uprooted. It doesn't break, it doesn't fall in the midst of anything that comes. So let's be like that palm tree, that cedar tree that is planted by the house of the Lord. It's not planted anywhere. It says they will flourish and bear fruit in old age. In old age, they will still stay fresh and green. In 2024, as Ethan has told us, let us grow physically. Some of us are trying to cut physical because kilo ni kama imeenda sana. But you can as well grow your muscles without growing the fat. Let's grow physically in 2024. Let's grow spiritually. We've been told, read your Bible, have fellowship. As parents, we find a way of creating a culture in our home where we have fellowship and we bring up our children in the way they should be. And in the end of it, as Ethan told us, we will save our people. Ethan said, Gideon manned up. He could have been the weakest, but he manned up and he saved his people. Let us be focused and hopeful, as we've been told. Asante sana. God bless you.
Let's give a round of applause again.